Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to learn about a two-dimensional array. A two-dimensional array helps the programmers to store and process table of data elements of similar type in computer memory. It is similar to a matrix containing number of rows and columns. The rows and columns of 2D array are indexed by starting from 0, that is row index starts with 0 and ends with row size minus 1, and column index starts with 0 and ends with column size minus 1. So the 2D array elements can be processed by using common array name with two index representing row and columns. So it means a two-dimensional array nothing but it helps us to access the values that can be stored in the form of table. So in a table what we have rows and columns. So these we call as rows. So rows, these are rows and these are columns. Okay, so these are columns and these are rows. Now usually in table we store the values in this form. So if a programmer wants to store the values in a tabular form or in the matrix form, you can say, then we can use a two-dimensional array so that I can read the data systematically or handle the data systematically. So to do that, I need, as in single dimensional array we had only one dimensional array, either this way or this way. Okay, and to access these values we had index 0, 1, 2, 3, so on. Similarly here it had, right, if I am going to store in single dimensional array either this or this, I used to have an index which starts with 0 and up to the index size was up to size of the array minus 1. Now since in two-dimensional array I have a row as well as column, right? So I will be needing rows as well as column index. So row index starts with 0 up to row size minus 1 and column index starts with 0 up to column size minus 1, right? So let's see here. To store and process 6 subject marks of 5 students, how do I declare a two-dimensional array? I declare it as A of 5, A of 5, 6, you can say. It means it is a array which has 5 rows and 6 columns and the data type is int. So you can see here in the table I have shown here 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually there are 6 columns, but since our index starts with 0, it is from 0 to 5, that is 6 minus 1, 5. Similarly rows we have 5, but our index starts with 0 up to row size minus 1, right? So let's see here. To store and process table of integer values containing 2 rows and 3 columns, how do I declare? So it will be like integer type of value. I am going to store in an array A which has 2 rows, 3 columns. So when I declare like this, it means I am going to handle the data in this form. It has 2 rows and 3 columns. Similarly, you can see here. Here we had stored integer type of value. I can also store float type of values. If I am going to store floating type of values, I can declare it as float. Here in an example of 3 by 2 array. 3 by 2 array means 3 rows. First, always remember rows comes first, then column comes, just like our matrix, row into column. Okay. So 3 rows and 2 columns. Right. Now, how do we declare a two-dimensional array? A two-dimensional array must be declared in the declaration part of the main before the array elements are used in the executable part of main by using common name with two indices representing number of rows and columns. Right. So let's see the syntax. What is the syntax? The syntax is what type of data I am going to store in the array, then the name of the array, then what is the size of the rows, what is the size of the column. So this is the syntax for declaration. Where it should be declared? It should be declared in the declaration part of the main program. Declaration part is just when we declare integer values before writing the program. I mean, where we declare the variables before the starting of the program, there we have to write. So the data type, what does the data type mean? The data type here means the data type of data to be stored and processed in computer memory, like integer, float, character, double, long int, etc. Right? They can be any type. Data type can be any type. Now array name should be a valid identifier. We should follow the same rules as we follow for variables. Row and column size, it is nothing but the maximum number of rows and column elements that can be stored in the array. Now let's see an example. To store the integer values, let's say for example 5 into 5 matrix, how do I declare? I declare the data type, that is int, the array name as A, and row size and column size. How many rows are there? We have 5 rows and 5 columns. Right. So total occupancy of this array is, how do we calculate how many bytes of memory is needed? It is nothing but row into column into 2 bytes. As we are storing integer type, each int take 2 bytes. So 2 bytes. So therefore it is totally 50 bytes are needed to store 5 into 5 array elements. Now to store and process table integers containing 2 rows and 3 columns, how do I declare? Already have shown you. Int A of 2 rows, 3 columns. Right. So next example is to store the names of 100 students. Okay. To store names of 100 students, we are declaring an array called name, which is capable of storing character type of data. How many rows are there? 100 rows are there and 25 columns are there. So total memory occupied by this array is 100 into 25 into 1 byte, because each character takes 1 byte of memory. Right. So totally is 25000 bytes I need. Okay. Now initialization of two-dimensional array. Let's have a look. The process of assigning the values to the defined array elements of 2D array is called initialization of 2D array. To initialize the array elements, we have two different ways. One is compile time array initialization, another one is runtime initialization. I think we have already seen it in single dimensional array. It's just a repetition of that. So compile time array initialization, if the values are well known by programmer in advance, then the programmer makes the use of compile time initialization. That is, the process of assigning the values during the declaration of array in the declaration part of main is called compile time initialization. So the syntax is as follows: data type, array name, row size and column size equal to into opening and closing curly braces. I can give the list of values as it is shown here. So if the user knows the values before the program itself, he can initialize the values. For example, here an integer type of array A is there, which has 2 rows and 3 columns. So how do I give? I write it in curly braces like this. We have 2 rows. So integer type of value A, 2 rows and 3 columns. So how do I initialize? I write it in curly braces. So inside the curly brace, how many rows are there? So that many in a curly brace I write. How many columns are there? Those many values I am going to write here. Right. So in row 1, column number 1 is 10, 20, 30, so on. Okay, column number 2, column number 3. Now similarly, for row 2, column number 1, it contains 40, next it contains 50, next it contains 60. So when I declare like this, the values will be stored in a tabular form, as you can see here. Right. So this is either I can declare in this fashion or I can also write in this fashion. Right. Directly into opening and closing brace. If I go on writing sequentially the column values, the values in the array, it will be stored. So there are 2 ways. Either I can write in this fashion or I can write in this fashion. Right. So one more example we have shown here. Here we have initialized 0. If you can see here, if I have not initialized the row value or the column value, and if I am writing the values that have to be stored in the array, it automatically initializes the value. As we have missed here row value, we have written only column value, but we have already set the number of columns. But the number of values that I have given here is 4. So it will automatically understand that there are 2 columns. So it will find out how many rows are needed to store 4 values. So 2 into 2 is 4. So it will create 2 rows and 2 columns. Right. A runtime array initialization. If the values are not known by user in advance, then the programmer makes the use of runtime initialization. That is, programmer reads value from user through keyboard by using input function like scanf, getch, getas, etc. So let's have a look here. To read and display integer values of m into n matrix by using 2D array. So what is the question? The question is to read and display values of m into n matrix. Right. As we always start the program with stdio.h. If we are going to use scanf and printf, we have written here already header file, include stdio.h, and we write include conio.h if I am using clear screen. Right. Now I am declaring an array int a of 25 rows and 25 columns. Right. And we also have some variables like m, n, I and j, which are also the type int. Let's see where do we use them. Okay. Then clear screen. Then on the screen I am printing print enter the order of a matrix. So it will come like this on the screen. Enter the order of the matrix. And if the user enters as 2 into 3, that is 2 rows and 3 columns, then automatically it should initialize that the limit of the array is 2 into 3. So scanf %d, ampersand m and ampersand n. It means read the first value and store it in m, read the second value and store it in n. Now print enter %d values in row order, that is m into n. So it will print on the screen as enter 6 values in row order, right? Because it should be okay. So here you can see m into n is row into column, which will be initialized at the placeholder d. So we write here enter 6 values in row order. So the user will enter as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So which we are supposed to read into the array. So here we have m into n array. So usually array or matrix, you can say how the values in the matrix are stored. The matrix values are stored like this. What do we call? How do we start? We say this is 0, 0 element, 0, 1 element, 0, 2 element. What does it mean? 0th row, 0th column. So this is row number 0. This is column number 0. This is column number 1. This is column number 2. This is row 1. This is row 2. Like this, right? So the value that is stored here is identified by the index 0, 0. Right? That is 0th row, 0th column. This is 0th row, first column. 0th row, second column. Similarly, when I come to row number 2, it will be first row, row number 1, column number 0. Row number 1, column number 1. Row number 1, column number 2. Similarly, if I am in row number 2, it will be row 2, column 0, row 2, column 1, row 2, column 2. Right? So this is how the elements of a matrix or an array we are going to access. If I want to access the value that is stored here, how should I say it? I should say its row number and its column number. Right. Similarly, if I am storing or reading, I have to refer to that particular element with its row and column number. So to do this, we are going to write for loop here. For I is equal to 0, that is I am going to store the values row wise first. Okay. So to store row wise, I am starting with the row value 0. That is, I am initializing index I is equal to 0. How long it should do? As long as the number of rows are there, that is row wise, I have to go on storing. So it should be I less than m. I less than m means what is m here? M is 2. Right? So I less than m. So m we have taken here 2. Right? It should start with 0 up to 2. It should go on stored, reading the values. And how it should store? I am using for loop, one more for loop. So here I am saying j is equal to 0 up to j less than n. N is our column. So from here it should start and up to the end of the column it should go on storing row by row. For I is equal to 0, I less than m is the row value, I plus plus I am performing. Inside this I have one more for loop where I am using j as an index value for the array. J is less than n is the column value. Right. We have scanf %d ampersand a of I j. Right. So this is the body of inner for loop. This is the body of outer for loop. So initially when I is equal to 0, it will check the condition is I less than m. What is our m? M is 2. It will check here, is it less than m? Yes, if it is less than m, it will enter into the inner for loop wherein j is checked. J starts with 0 and it is checking is j less than n. N is here 3, so it will take here 3. So as long as this condition is true, the for loop executes. Okay. Now see here, we have scan %d ampersand a comma ampersand a of I j. So first value that is scanned, it has to be stored at the location a of I j. What is our I? I is 0, so it is a of 0. What is our j? J is also 0. So we say the first value that is scanned has to be stored at a of 0, 0. So user has entered 1. So 1 will be stored at a of 0, 0. A of 0, 0. So in this array, it is 2 by 3 array. So the first element, it will be at 0, 0, that is row 0, row is 0, column is 0. And the second element will be row 0 and column 0, 1. Then row 0, column 1. Right? So this is row 1, this is column 1, this is column 2. So now the first element, that is 1, where it will be stored? It will be stored at 0th row, 0th column. Right. Now once it is done, the inner for loop has j. J will be incremented by 1. J is equal to j plus, which is nothing but j is equal to j plus 1. So initial value of j was 0. 0 plus 1, it is nothing but 1. It means now I will be referring to the next element in the array because our I is still 0. So is 1 less than 3? It is first checked. Yes, if it is true, then again the second iteration is done. Now here what we are doing is for the second iteration, a of I j is there. I is still 0, so a of 0 and j is 1 will be initialized with the next value, that is 2. Right. So 2 will be stored at this location. Similarly, as long as the value of j is less than 3, this is being done. So for a of 0, 2, the next value will be initialized, that is 3. 3 will be stored here. Now when the j value becomes 3, here the j value was 2, here the j value will become 3. When it becomes 3, we will check before starting the loop, is 3 less than 3? No, it will come out of the loop. But our outer loop I is still 0. Now this will be incremented. So I is equal to I plus plus, which is equal to 0 plus 1 will be done. Now value of I becomes 1. And again it will enter the for loop, inner for loop. So inner for loop again it starts with j is equal to 0, j less than n. Right. So for us here a of I, a of j, now value of I has started with 1, whereas the value of j, it goes on changing. So this has become, it is now referring to row number 1, but the value of the column goes on changing. Right. So now we will be storing the value at a of 1 comma 0, a of 1 comma 1, a of 1 comma 2. Right. So if you can see here, the values will be stored in this fashion. 0 comma 0 will have 1, 0 comma 1 will have 2, 0 comma 2 will have 3, and 1 comma 0 will have 4, 1 comma 1 will have 5, 1 comma 2 will have 6. So these values are stored in the array in this format. Right. Now let us see how to print the elements of the array. So printf array elements, which will print a message like this. And I am saying for I is equal to 0, I less than the row value, increment the value of I, and inside the for loop I have one more for loop for incrementing the column value. For j is equal to 0, j less than n, j plus plus. How to print? Printf printf percentage t a of ij. Now this t is just to give a space over here, tab value, so that the elements are printed little bit away from each others. Okay. Now let's see here. Now I have value at the array locations 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. I have 4, 5, 6 at array location, array 1, comma 0, 1, comma 1, 1, comma 2. Right? So this is the value that is stored in the matrix. So this is my row 0. This is my row 1. This is my column 0. This is column 1. And this is column 2. So sequentially I am supposed to print the values from row 0. Sequentially I am going to print as column row 0, column 0, row 0, column 1, row 0, column 2. Then I go to the second column and I print it in this fashion. So row wise I am going to print it. So to perform that, we are going to use for loop here. So we have two for loop, the outer and the inner for loop. As I have already explained, the outer for loop we are going to use for rows. So I is going to start with 0. It is going to execute till the end of the row. Right. This for loop will execute till the end of the row. And in a for loop we have j, which I am initializing to 0, and it will execute till the end of the columns. Right. And inside that we have a printf. Printf, what I am printing? Printf percentage d a of I and j. Right. So when I is equal to 0, j will be equal to 0. Okay, let's see first. When I is equal to 0, I is being checked with the value m. M here is 2. As long as this condition is true, it will enter the loop. So when it enters the loop, in inner for loop has j is equal to 0 and j less than 3 is being checked, right? So initially a of I j means it is going to perform a of 0 comma 0. So I am referring to the first element. So the first element will be printed. Similarly, I value will be constant, but the inner for loop is incrementing. So the value of j keeps on changing, right? From 0, 1 and 2. So the first row value will be printed. And when j becomes 3, the inner for loop is uh, exited and the outer for loop I increments. So I becomes now I is equal to 1. So now we will be referring to the row number 1, but the inner for loop as it starts with j is equal to 0, you can see here it is still going to start with 0 up to 2. So we will be referring to a of 1 comma 1, will be referring to a of 1 comma 2, and when j becomes 3 again, it exits the for loop. So by then we have printed all the elements, right? So lastly, get ch and close the program and the main program. Now some of the assignment questions are given here. Write a C program to find addition of two matrices A and B of the same size. Write a C program to find multiplication of two matrices A of m comma n and b of p comma q. So we shall see that in the next class. Hope you have understood. So we shall see the two assignments in the next class. Thank you.